Hello to our gorgeous, gorgeous IAMPRO community. I'm so blessed and happy to have OMARI Douglas here with us today. You might know him from It's a Sin, which was a huge success and totally amazing. It blew my mind. I was lucky enough to see him at the vaudeville, and I can't wait to hear about the history in the theatre and what his preferences are actually. So, without further ado, I am going to bring in the man himself, Mr. OMARI Douglas. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for your time today, for coming to speak to us. These chats are always so helpful in one way or another to our subscribers and to the IAMPRO community and to people beyond. So I have so much gratitude for you today. Thank you.
It's also slick and beautiful as well. That little ident at the beginning, I was like, ooh.
You should have seen me when I first started doing this. I was like, I've got much slicker. So, OMARI, talk to me. You are a fellow arts ed student.
I know. Yeah. So I went to Pineapple Dance Studios yesterday to do a class with my first year jazz teacher, Karen Edwards, who she left recently, very, very recently, and she started sort of she just wanted to sort of bring her work like to the outside world, but also it gave us a place to like go and just sort of reconnect with all of that stuff. And I mean, there were so many things that I was thinking about, like about going to do this class, but it was so lovely because I think the year that I was there, I started in 2012, so 10 years ago, which is mad. My year were really close with each other, really, really close year. And I still am now with so many of them. And like class is obviously a place for like kind of going to reconnect with all of that stuff. And we were doing that technique like 3-4 times a week. It was pretty rigorous, but also it's just nice to know that I spent 3 years with like people who, you know, some who I consider my family now. And I'm so grateful for the people that I met along the way in that building. I had a really great time there. I did. I think in retrospect, you know, you do take on a lot. And I was 18 when I started. So, you know, as much as I kind of thought, you know, oh yeah, I'm mature, I'm ready for this, you're also really not. Like, you're juggling so many things and trying to live sort of independently, sort of with your finances and just life choices and that kind of thing. Yeah, such a like formative, massive time in my life.
I think one of the best things to come out of drama school are those relationships that you form, for sure.
Yeah.
And I didn't do 3 years. I did a year and then left because I got EastEnders. But I feel like I've got a couple of really good friends, but that's the part of me that I'm like, I wish I had done the 3 years.
Yeah.
Did you do the musical theatre or acting?
I did the musical theatre course. Yeah.
Okay.
How were arts ed when you said that you were going to do something?
I sort of ran down the corridor going, see you later. I don't know, I'm so conflicted about that because so many drama schools are like, don't do work, you've got to stay and train, you know, that's more important. And I sort of get that, but on one hand, it's like a huge job. I mean, it was a no-brainer for me at that time. You know, EastEnders was pretty much at its height, and I'd watched it since I was a kid, and as a platform and as a training ground, really, for me, it was extraordinary. You know, I was very blessed with the character and who she is becoming now as a woman. You know, I get to really flex my kind of acting muscles with her. Although
you are. I feel like I grew up with Janine.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. You poor thing.
Yeah.
God, you don't want to grow up with her. Jesus. But you said you did class, so you went to Pineapple class. First of all, let's go dancing together. I'd love that.
Yeah, right.
How important is it for you? And do you still do acting classes, the work on the craft outside of working professionally now? Because I know the Americans do it quite a lot, but it's not
Yeah,
so much of a thing here. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really important. And I think when a couple of years ago, um, two friends of mine, Alice and Dan, so they have a class that they used to teach at the Actors Centre, um, which is now, I'm not sure what
Go
happened to the Actors Centre. Yeah, it's gone. They used to teach.
at the theatre.
Yeah, they used to teach a class there, uh, which was based on, I think she was an American practitioner who used to teach them, and she kind of moved on a little bit, and they took over from her. And during lockdown, they kind of moved it all online. And at this point, I hadn't taken myself to like any class that was to do with specifically with acting technique since I'd gone. And I don't know, there was something about that particular element where I was really scared of like going back to class in that sense, because I just sort of, I don't know, it felt really vulnerable to sort of like have to break all that down again. And especially when you were in training, you were doing all of that stuff with people that you'd built a relationship with. So I was really nervous to step out and do it again. But, you know, I saw it through pretty much all the way through lockdown. And it was one of the most valuable sort of experiences that I could have had, like since leaving, you know,
Yeah.
that building where you're used to what you're doing every day. But, you know, I think personally that there is only so much that being on a 3-year course can teach you.
Did you
Because
feel prepared when you went into It to Sin, having been on that course? Because musical theatre is something different, isn't it? So did you feel prepared for it, the set and what to expect?
in all honesty, no. But I don't mean that in a way to sort of speak down on the training that I had, because we did do some sort of like television craft work when I was in my 3rd year on that course. But for me, I think I was sort of, you know, I just couldn't believe the situation that I was in. Like I sort of had no screen experience or an experience of being on set up until that first day
Wow.
in Manchester when Peter, our director, said action. So I was like, was a quivering mess. But I think all that I could take with me was just my experience of being a performer to
Yes.
up to that point. Because, you know, having done that show and the show having come out and had such a massive impact, and sort of having to watch all that work back, um, which I initially found a sort of like strange, difficult thing to have to do when obviously it wasn't a medium that I was used to working in. And, you know, I've sort of had times where I've thought to myself, like, God, like I could have done this, I could have done that.
Yeah.
But actually, I couldn't have, because I was just taking the experience that I had with me in that moment.
Yeah.
I think that's the brilliance of like what we do, is that I feel like with every job that I do, I am, as you said, about sort of like just going into EastEnders straight away. Like you do the training like whilst you're on the job. And I think, you know, I'd say 90% of the time, we're lucky that we're surrounded by generous people and collaborators on set who are gonna sort of show you the ropes and take you under their wing. And I definitely felt like that. So um
Amazing.
yeah.
What was the biggest surprise for you with filming coming from theatre, which we'll get into?
Um oh, that's a good question. Um oh my God.
For me,
I
I
was
think
I was
yeah,
gonna
go
say
on.
that I was gonna say that hours are, do you know what? I think there's when you are working in theatre, I think you can sort of rely on the adrenaline of a one chance live element to sort of like propel you through. Um, and the length of time that you can spend on a set, and all of a sudden you're just sort of having to like step into energy. It's sort of, and the thing that I'm still learning now is to sort of like learn what to do with time when you're sat in a trailer,
Uh-huh.
because you can either like work yourself into overdrive and then get onto set and be like, oh shit, I've used all my, oh, it's fine. I could use all my, I've used all my energy, or it's like, let me just chill and actually not think about anything and just trust everything and just allow yourself to then step into that space and use what's in here. So, yeah, I'm still, you know, because I've done a few other jobs on set since then. And it's great because I feel like I'm sort of pulling things from previous experiences every time and going, oh, I remember that from last time. I remember this from last time. Don't do that. So yeah, it's like, It's a Sin was a baptism of fire for sure. But I think it has given me a training that I didn't have. Yeah.
It was an extraordinary piece of work.
Thank you.
Such a huge fan, like totally fangirling. Yeah, that I was going to say that just to, I wasn't sure if I put you on the spot to try and give you some inspiration about The Biggest Surprise. It was the hanging around, and you're right. It's what is the best? How can I best utilize this time? Because yeah, it can be. I think also on a long running show, you can fall into quite lazy habits, you know. So it's
Yeah.
staying productive, it's staying on top, but also trusting that you've done the work. So with that TV show, how much rehearsal was there? Did you go onto the set knowing what your character would be doing, what their journey was physically within the set? Was it something that you worked with the director in the moment on?
Yeah. We did. I know you've sort of chatted with Callum already. I'm not sure whether he told
Yeah,
you, but we did like a rehearsal week before we actually got
that's
onto
right.
set and started filming. And I say rehearsal week, but it was actually more of a week for us to just like connect with each other, get to
Yeah.
know each other, establish relationships. And that was a luxury, because I've sort of realized since then that like sort of not every production will allow for that kind of thing. And actually that's the thing that I've taken away from, you know, that experience of knowing that you don't get it all the time, is that you can be proactive and sort of like try and connect with those people like before, you know, you end up on set with them, because most of the time you sort of like go in and sort of you just meet them on the set and it's just like, right, let's go. But we just established that kind of thing. And then in terms of getting onto set, we it was interesting for me because I think I had a lot of kind of, maybe I almost set myself up for what I kind of expected something to be. And then actually you land in that moment and it's like, oh, this is actually something completely different. And I think what I'm trying to learn now is to like let go. And I think when you let go, you are able to surprise yourself
Yeah.
and actually really relax into the moment and enjoy it more. I finished filming the second season of I Hate Susie a few months ago. Um
Can't wait to see that.
yeah, that comes out at sometime around Christmas time, I think. Some
Mm.
point at the end of the year. And that that experience on set was so joyful for me because, you know, from the kind of like terror of being on set that first time when I was doing It to Sin, and sort of 2 years on from there, or nearly 3 years actually, um, uh, it was nice to go onto a set, and especially when you're working with writers like Lucy Preble, who welcome that kind of, uh, well, encourages you to improv sometimes. Uh,
Really? I was wondering how collaborative
yeah,
that process, because I'm such a huge fan of hers.
yeah, she's so brilliant, and I mean, her and Billy, the way they work together, it's just like they're just like a life force, and it's so amazing seeing, you can see the sort of how long that collaboration has been going on for. They're
Yeah.
just so in tune with each other. And yeah, Lucy lets you improvise around beats a little bit, and I sort of hadn't had that experience, but actually I was just kind of just like, what can go wrong, you know?
Yeah.
So letting go just feels really, really great.
Mm. Do you have
Yeah.
a preference when you're on set? Because obviously, if it's single camera, it's being shot from all different angles, so it can be very repetitive.
Mm.
Do you offer up different things? And is your preference to get your stuff done first? I'm imagining you're a very generous actor and give the full performance when the camera isn't on you. But for me, I do like a little bit of time to kind of figure out my journey. So my preference would always be, I think, to go after, although I contradict myself all the time, because instinctively, if it's very emotional, it's quite good to get it out of the way. Do you
Get it
have a
out.
preference where you work? Yeah.
I don't know. It's like it's quite the thing that I find really interesting is sort of like working with lots of other established players who are, you know, have had years of experience on set, and they're really able to like take charge of those technicalities and saying, you know, can we go and do some close coverage first so that I can just get it out? But I
Right.
think what I've realized, I had some interesting conversations about it actually when we were shooting I Hate Susie, about sort of the journey to getting towards your coverage, and sort of when you're on a wide, I tend to find anyway, like, and this is sort of stating the obvious, of course, but like I find that when I'm on with the wide, you're sort of the there's no awareness, and then once you get to coverage, you're like,
Yeah.
oh my god, it's right there. But actually, you know, at that point, you've had to settle into a rhythm of kind of like what you need to hit.
Yeah.
And so as much as you do kind of feel like, oh my God, this is, you know, so intrusive here, it's like, actually, this is in my muscle memory a little bit. But then at the same time, you're still trying to find that spontaneity again, and that
Yeah.
sort of like, and live that moment as if it was the first
Yeah.
time. So yeah, I feel like I'm still learning about all of
Yeah.
that stuff too.
Me
I
too.
just
Me
think
too.
I'm right way. Yeah.
I'm just going to explain by wide what Omar means is a wide shot is where they do like an establishing shot of the whole scene, and they usually do that first, and then they come in and they do the coverage on each individual. Just for those people that are watching that have never been on a set. Auditions. Talk to me about auditions, and then we're going to go on to a process. So when you get a script for an audition, which I would imagine isn't dissimilar from your process when you get a script to go into a job, how do you go about it? Do you just talk us through what you do?
Um, well, I'm so funny when you're at college, you get given such a sort of like, well, you get given and you get taught like these sort of like textbook methods into ways of trying to just sort of like access material. Um, and I think I found myself kind of getting stuck with a lot of those things that are kind of come from practitioners, not because they're wrong, but just because we all function in different ways. Um,
100%.
and I'm quite cerebral. And so I think if I invite lots of other stuff into the equation, then it sort of sets me off a little bit. And so I think where I am right now in terms of like that process is just to read and to read and to read until I find some way in, which sounds incredibly vague, me saying that, but I just mean sort of uh, what I'm still getting an understanding of now is like, you just need to understand it for yourself, and like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah.
Um, you know, and you can go into an audition room and that sort of 50% of the time is not gonna be what they want. But you know, as long as you have found your way in, I guess that's the greatest kind of
Yeah.
access point for me.
I think don't underestimate, like, you can't just read a script one time and think that you know it. You know, it's for me, I've been in a rehearsal room, and this was, I wonder if you have had the same experience. And what I now realize is a process, because I hadn't done loads of theatre, but I did more as my career sort of went on. And I'll be sort of a week off the show and I'll be doing a scene and it just hasn't clicked and I can't find it. And I've read the play so many times and we've rehearsed the scene and then one thing will happen. I'll find one gesture or one inflection on a line that just suddenly drops it into place. And I've spent 3 weeks in fear. And so it's really learning to trust yourself. You go through this every time. You know that this is going to happen. You know that you'll feel like you haven't got it. And then you just trust that it will come. Do you have a similar experience, or what is it? How is your version?
Oh my God. Oh my God. I, well, you know, really recently I was in Cabaret, which Callum has started in this week.
I know. I'm gutted I didn't see you in it, but I'm definitely,
Yeah.
I've got to go see Callum. I'm
I
gutted I didn't.
know. I'm so excited. So excited to go see him. It's going to be
Yeah.
amazing. You know, it's such a unique book, that show. You know, was written in the 60s, and obviously the source material comes from much earlier. But you know, it's a script that has changed time and time again. It's changed with sort of like directors being able to go to the estate and sort of like ask lots of questions about things. But they are, you know, they're really, really challenging book scenes. And I think the brilliance of when you're working with, you know, a director like Rebecca Frecknell, who directed Cabaret, you're working with someone who has the kind of generosity to like allow that time for it to feel really uncomfortable. And all she did was like give us the space to just go, this is feeling really awful and feeling really difficult. And yeah, like that, I guess that's just the beauty of the journey, is like kind of wading through the shitty bits, and then actually you find something. You find what it is for you. Because I feel like a lot of the time, and especially when you're doing a show like that where there's such a perceived idea of like what the show is or like what it should be,
Mm.
if you find something for you, then like that's where you kind of, that's when you're like, you can exhale.
And feel like I belong all of a sudden. Like I've spent weeks in rehearsal rooms, sort of not really feeling part of, in a really weird way, you know.
Yeah.
And then yeah, it's so comforting to hear when I hear other performers and actors sharing their
Oh
experiences.
my God. Like it's, but I mean, rehearsals are amazing, but they're also incredibly vulnerable because
Yeah.
you're sort of, I think particularly with that show, with Cabaret as well, because I think for a lot of us, we were, in terms of the actual work itself, like the ensemble are so they're working with this sort of synergy. They're on stage together, and then the scenes are sparse in terms of the numbers of people on stage. It's only ever 2 or 3 people on stage. So when you've got this like huge room of people, so many people in the room, and all of a sudden like you're just stood on this stage that's been like built in the rehearsal room, and there's just 2 of you, and you look around and there's like 20, 30 people surrounding you. It's like, it's intimidating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, there's also a freedom that comes with that, though.
Yeah.
You know, comparing TV and being on a set to being on a stage, and that awareness that you were talking about when they come in for coverage,
Mm.
which I also have sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, I do it in rehearsal and there's no cameras on, and I'm like, oh God, it's much better in rehearsal and no one was looking. On stage, to be in that moment, and Denise Goff described it as being the conductor, which was a great way of viewing it. There's such a
Mm.
freedom in that, isn't there? Like
Yeah.
lack of awareness that happens, as long as you don't let that sort of intimidation swallow you up.
Yeah. It's trying to be able to relax. And Alice and Dan, whose classes I'd been doing, they speak about that all the time, and it's such an easier thing to say than to actually, you know, than to actually do, to achieve relaxation like in those kind of settings is really difficult, because you're trying to achieve something natural in a space that is kind of contrived in a way, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's Another brilliant uh, actor that I was working with recently, Anastasia Hill, she was talking about like if you're on set and you know you've been doing it and you just feel like, oh, I can't get to where I need to be. She was like, a lot of the time it's just like about shake, like literally just physically just trying to
Yeah.
shake it off and just like trying to let go and not give yourself such a hard time. And it's like you were saying, you know, I think uh and I think because I feel like I know my body quite well because of like my dance training and that kind of thing, I think we don't realize like how much our bodies are like physically a vessel for like what we're actually doing. And what you were saying about a gesture or something like being able to sort of help you just land into something, I think it's the same as just sort of like if you just sort of shrug something off, it can just give you like a new lease of, you know, life or energy
Like
and just
access,
get you back a little bit.
yeah, access into like a slipstream, isn't it? That you sort of then
Yeah.
get into. So while we're talking about relaxation and falling into that, how do you cope with nerves? Do you get nervous at the side of a stage? And we'll talk a little bit about self-care because that for me
Yeah.
is really important for actors going into this. You know, it's tough. So we have to look after ourselves. How
Yeah.
do you do that? And how do you cope with those nerves?
Um I really try. I'm trying to think about like the last few times where I've gone on, particularly when you go on stage and you're and it's like the first preview, and I'm thinking about cabaret and I'm thinking about constellations in particular, because like when we were in the rehearsal room, me and Russell would just like burst out laughing because we were like, we actually can't believe that we actually have to go out on stage and like do this freaking huge two-hander play. Like it's the scare, it is the scariest thing. I actually don't remember before that ever being so scared to like go out on stage.
Yeah.
But I just, from what I remember, I think I just like try and embrace it and like just go, this thing is like happening to me right now. And I guess there's no greater thrill than just like stepping out into the unknown like that. And it's so strange because you go, we've rehearsed this so many times now. And for some reason, the I feel like the way the nerves are manifesting itself in you is it's as if like it's all just gonna go wrong, when actually like it's there, it's embedded, it's in the muscle memory, like you've been rehearsing it for, you know, 4 or 5 weeks, however long you get. But I just really try and embrace it. I'm a little bit like kind of OCD about like what I do like before, not necessarily in the dressing room before, but like when I'm in the wing and like just about to step out, I do it sort
What
of
is
like
that? Talk us through it. Okay, if you want to. Yeah.
it's just like a silly little kind of, not a prayer, it's not a prayer, but it's just sort of like it's just like a wish to sort of like myself to just kind of like go out and do the best that I can, you
I
know.
think that's, listen, I am all down with a prayer.
Yeah.
I consider it, it's like a gentle nod to the subconscious, the universe to just guide me through and let this be what it will be, you
Yeah,
know. And
definitely.
and if you can step into that, and I think it's comforting and important actually.
Yeah.
You know, 5 years ago, I'd be like, I don't pray, you know. But I think it's okay. It's just yeah, it's a quiet reminder to the subconscious that it is just going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what do you do, or do you have anything that you do to look after your mental health around the job, which can be so encompassing with It's a Sin? I mean, huge profiles catapulted into the public eye.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that, and how do you stay kind of on top of well, mental being, I suppose?
God, it was completely overwhelming, like without trying to sort of like overuse that word, like it really, really was. And in so many instances, and I have no shame in saying that, like for all the joy that it brought to
Yeah.
like sort of like have a response to that show, it was like anxiety inducing as well, particularly in the run up to it, in its first airing, transmission, um because I just felt like I put myself on the line, you know. um and it seems strange to say, considering we were in the safest hands, you know. Nicola Schindler and Russell T Davies
Yes.
were so um nurturing and kind to us. And you know, I think you know, whenever I'd kind of share that fear with people, they'd say, yeah, but they're these sort of like huge television sort of figures who have put you there because they wanted to put you there, sort of, you know, regardless of like what experience you think or think that you didn't have. um and so it was really, for me, it was really difficult to actually come to terms with like that the work I'd done was the work I'd done, and sort of there was no going back and sort of changing it. And I think, you know, it was a big shift for me because, you know, up until that moment, you know, I sort of had like 4 5 years before of that, of just being in the theatre where, you know, even though there's repetition, things don't feel as finite as being on a set and something being captured on film, and that is it. um but you know, I have an amazing support network of people around me, and um, I'm so grateful for that. Um, we as a cast, like, all really looked out for each other, I think, and yeah, it was a really it was a big learning curve for me. Just huge life experience, like having to go through something like that, you know, for so many reasons. You know, the fact that we were sort of becoming advocates for the issues in the show, um just speaking publicly more than I had ever had to in my life.
Are you
uh,
comfortable with it?
I got more I feel comfortable doing it now. I sort of um I tend to feel kind of comfortable doing that sort of thing most of the time. But yeah, I mean, you know, all of a sudden you've got publicists involved in your life who are sort of like guiding you through that stuff and like really taking care of you and sort of making sure that you're safe and sort of you know, have the right advice in terms of those things on speaking publicly. But you know, for me as well, I had this fear that because I had sort of was familiar with all of Russell's work before. I remember in the run up to the show going, "Oh my god, we're all just going to get gay bashed." I just thought, that's what I thought that most of the media reaction was going to be. And because, well, not necessarily the sort of like print media or press, but more the fact that we were all on social media. And I just thought to myself, we are going to get absolutely hounded. And surprisingly, like, that has been not the case, sort of 98% of the time. And you know, you have to learn when to step away from those things
Mm.
because um they're strange things that we've let become a part of our life. And you know, we put that we have dependency on those things. I'm sort of speaking from my own experience. We create dependency around it, and all of a sudden we allow those spaces to dictate who we are, you know. Because if one person says their opinion, you suddenly allow it to like enter you, and to really feel like, oh my god, that person said that about me. Is that entirely true? Well, no. But you know, phones and social media, it sort of created this sort of like alternative reality where sort of like it's really hard to sort of separate, you know, this reality from sort of just opinion and talk and messiness and people being loud. So but you know, on the other hand, we got so much from support from that community too.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah.
it's conversation, the social media one for sure. I try not to read the comments. So if I read some of the, I have to remember a lot of them are about Janine, because otherwise I'd be like,
this is not me. Yeah.
do you watch yourself back, and are you critical, or are you do you speak kindly about yourself?
Terribly so, terribly critical.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually, I had this really visceral, strong reaction to like watching myself and It's a Sin for the first time. And I was just like, I was just like, I couldn't believe, I was like, I don't know, because the strange thing is that like when you're actually there and you're doing the work, you feel, you know, you feel like that you're sort of owning that moment the best you can. And all of a sudden I was just sort of like, I think potentially it was to do with the nature of my character too, and sort of, you know, there was an unapologeticness about him that I think was sort of quite confronting for me to see myself like in those circumstances actually. So I think there was that part of it too. But I think it was like hearing yourself speak for the first time, or also hearing your, you know, like listening to yourself sing for the first time. And actually, you know, I think 2-3 years on from there now, I'm going into ADR to do stuff, you know, for other things, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. So
But we
yeah,
have to learn to be gentle with ourselves, don't we? I think we learn that as we go, as we get older, and you know, the self-compassion that
yeah.
about.
And what's refreshing to me is like hearing from, you know, actors and artists who've been doing this for decades, and they still carry that kind of worry with them.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that we're not alone in those fears. I think, you know, what we do, like, you know, this industry can really easily make you feel lonely, because we're constantly trying to be resilient, and we're constantly trying to be strong, and just sort of like just sort of be true to ourselves. And yet, you know, when you're in your bedroom on your own and you're reading a script, and you are sort of, you know, when you're investing in something, knowing most of the time that it is like luck of, you know, it's like luck of the draw, you I guess we don't sort of like share that feeling with our peers like often enough,
Mm.
because I guess most of the time it's about sort of like, you know, just stepping out into the world and sort of like trying to be as sort of confident as you possibly can, because you want to sort of, you know, you want to create a steady path. But actually I've realized that the vulnerability and the honesty is so important, you
So,
know.
so
Yeah. And even just telling people, like, we did this brilliant thing in cabaret where every day we'd do a check-in, we'd stand in a big circle, and Julia, our choreographer, would get us to just go around and either say a word for how we were feeling, or just sort of a short sentence. And like, you know, a lot of the time I'd sort of be, people would be really vulnerable in that space. And those kind of things I just think are so beautiful and valuable, because I just think, how can you do your best work if you're in a hostile space? And
100%.
a lot of the time, those are the spaces that can be created, and you're just expected to like navigate your way around it. And then you're scared to be crap, you know?
So true. I mean, but it only takes one person to be unafraid of
Yeah.
that vulnerability, to lead the way, to open up that for
Yeah.
everybody else, one person.
Mhm.
And on the flip of that, one person toxic environment.
Yeah. I'm sure
Yeah.
we've all seen that. Yeah.
So we'll have to be leaders in the vulnerability Fight.
Yes.
Fight is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Is the theatre calling, Omari? Are we going to get to see you back on stage soon?
I mean, it's not in the pipeline right now, but I'm definitely at a stage now where I'm really excited to just kind of, I have nothing firm at all in that in this sense, but I'm like, I'm really lucky that I've just I received funding from the Arts Council this year to like start doing some research just on things that are sort of churning away in my own mind.
To
But yeah,
create.
to start creating stuff. And so yeah, I'm really excited, and not because I'm like I have this one solid idea that I'm going to do, but I just think it's such a great institution that we have, that like we are able to just go away and like spend time just sort of trying to nurture our own sort of creativity and ideas. Because I think particularly with the training that I had, and I was saying this to Karen, my jazz teacher, yesterday when I saw her. um there's such this easy thing to fall into when you're in a school where there's so much discipline. I think I left, and a lot of people leave, you're just wanting to serve the other person. You're wanting to serve the person who, is above you. um and actually, I don't know if in training enough we're given the space to understand who we are as like an artist, and like what agency we have, and like what we actually want to show to the world. And I think because because this industry moves so quickly, I think there was an element of like just graduating and just doing work, 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 which to a degree was good, but also you need the time to stop to actually go, who am I? And like, what do I actually want to say? Because otherwise the work just becomes work, rather than actually wanting to put something out into the world that has come from a place of authenticity. And that is now really, really, really important for me moving forwards in my journey, because you know I I I don't just want to always have to serve someone else's lens or idea or perspective. I want to be able to sort of like speak from my own place. So um hopefully, who knows, like who knows what it will be, who knows if there will be anything, but I'm just excited to sort of like explore that avenue.
It's exploring that, and it's letting the artist in us come out. And I do think that's what's missing, nurturing the individual and what stories they have to say. And you articulated that so beautifully. I'm like, yes, yes. And one last question, and then, oh my God, 43 minutes. We're a little bit over. Thank you for giving me a bit of extra time. I might put you on the spot, so if you can't think of anything, don't worry. But is there one note that you've had? Like, what is the best note that you've ever had? Has there been one thing you've gone, game changer?
I say this all the time, but I've worked a few times with a brilliant theatre practitioner called Mike Shepherd, who's an actor, and he used to run Knee High in Cornwall. Just amazing, innovative theatre company. I sort of worked with them a few times, and the first show that I did with them was Tristan and Isolde at the Globe, and we were touring for ages. And his ethos and his like work ethic is so collaborative, and to do with generosity of spirit, and just people being able to rely on each other. And I remember we were in rehearsals, I think it was when we were in rehearsals, he said, your guys' job is to make each other look good, because the minute that you take the attention off of yourselves and like think about the other person and just literally just make them look good, then you're gonna do a great job, because you're being generous, and you're kind of stripping the ego from yourself. So yeah, I carry that around with me a lot. I just think generosity and collaboration are really important.
Maury, that is a mantra for life. Be of service, take yourself out of self and help other people. Mantra for life.
Yeah.
You're amazing. Thank you so much. It's been such a beautiful chat, and I feel really honoured to have had for you to have given me your time today for us to chat. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
hope our
you.
paths cross soon.
I know. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
They will. They will. We'll stay in touch.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right.
totally.
Thank you so much, love. Thank you,
Take
Maury.
care. Bye.
Bye.